We were all made to have relationships with one another. Good relationships, positive and healthy relationships, not negative or toxic ones. In Genesis 2, we read, you don't need to turn there, but we read in verse 18 that God said it is not good for the man or the woman to be alone. And we also read in Ecclesiastes, and let's turn there, book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 4. Talking also about this theme of relationships, starting in verse 7 of Ecclesiastes 4. Here again, I saw futility under the sun, someone without a friend, without son or brother, toiling endlessly, yet never satisfied with his wealth. For whom, he asks, am I toiling and denying myself the good things of life? This too is futile, a worthless task. Two are better than one, for their partnership yields this advantage. If one falls, the other can help his companion up again. But woe betide the solitary person who, when down, has no partner to help him up. And if two lie side by side, they keep each other warm. But how can one keep warm by himself? If anyone is alone, an assailant may overpower him, but two can resist, and a cord of 3 strands is not quickly snapped. So relationships are what we were designed for. But these relationships need to be good, healthy, wholesome relationships. And yet we sometimes, and maybe in some cases often, encounter difficulties in our relationships with others. Why? Why do we mess up so much? Even in the church sometimes, or in your family, your extended family, if not your nuclear family, or in your community, or in the nation. Why do we have so many challenges in our relationships? Well, I don't claim to give you the solution to all of that today, but we will talk about one aspect. And one major reason I submit to you that we have problems with one another in our relationships is that we want to control others. We want to control others. Now, we probably wouldn't admit to doing that. Perhaps we don't always recognize that we want to do that. But I see that very, very often. We want to control others, and others want to control us. What do I mean by that? Well, we want them to do things the way we think they should do them. Because obviously the way I do things is the right way to do things. So that's why I want you to do them that way too. You know, maybe a small example would be I put things in the dishwasher a certain way. That is not the same way that my wife does. But of course, I do it the right way. And she, I think, just to irk me, does it her way, you know. So there's a problem there in that relationship. You know, and I realize that's a small, maybe trivial example, but I think it illustrates the point. You see, we want others to make the choices that we think are right, to like the things we like, and maybe to dislike the things that we dislike. And so there is that effort. Let's look at a couple of examples. And I was looking at the book of Ruth recently, so let's turn there. Ruth is always a very encouraging book, but I noticed something at the beginning, and you know the story of how Naomi and her husband had left Israel because of the famine, and their sons married women in Moab, and one of these women was Ruth, of course. And then the sons died, and I'm in Ruth chapter 1, and after they died, she decided to go back to Judah. She heard that the famine was over, and she says, I'm going back home, don't have anybody here. And she left with her 2 daughters-in-law. 2 decided to go with her, Orpah and Ruth. And in verse 8 of Ruth 1, we read that Naomi tells her, the daughters-in-law, go back home to your own mothers, and may he grant you the security of a home with a new husband. So again, remember I said we like to tell others, we want to tell others what to do. So now you might say, well, this isn't a bad thing, is it? Well, the daughters-in-law going with her, they want to go with her back to, well, it's not their land, but she's going back to Judah. They want to go with her to Judah. And so she's telling them what to do. And what do? Well, they say, no, we shall return with you to your people. And so she keeps insisting, no. Look, even if I had children tonight, if I got married, had children, you're going to wait for them. No, it's not going to work. You go back, go home. And she insisted. Then Orpah, one of them, said, all right, fine, okay, I'll do what you want. I'm going home. I'm not going to come with you. But Ruth clung to her, it says in verse 14. And then Naomi insists, well, look, your sister-in-law's going back, go follow her. But Ruth said, don't urge me to do that. I'm going to go. And then, of course, the famous response of Ruth, where you go, I shall go. Where you stay, I shall stay. Your people will be my people, your God, my God. Where you die, I shall die, and there be buried. I solemnly declare before the Lord that nothing but death will part me from you. And when Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she said no more. So she stopped trying to control her. I mean, maybe you don't look at it quite that way, but we do want people to do things the way we think they should. So again, this may be an example where it's not something terrible. It's not as if Naomi wanted Ruth to do something terrible, but she still was pushing her desire. Another example is in the book of Acts that came to my mind. Acts, and this is in Acts 15, and we see a dispute. Again, remember we're talking about relationships. Relationships with one another. Good relationships, healthy, wholesome, uplifting. And here in Acts 15, starting in verse 36, we see Paul and Barnabas deciding to go back and see how our brothers are doing in the various towns where we proclaim the word of the Lord. Verse 37, Barnabas wanted to take John Mark. Paul insisted, no way. And verse 30, the dispute was so sharp that they parted company. Barnabas took Mark and Paul took Silas. So here, both of them are saying, it's my way, or the highway. I want Mark, says Barnabas, and Paul says, nope, I'm not going to do it. So both of them wanting things done their way, and that's the point here. And because they don't get their way, their relationship is severed. Maybe not permanently, but they go their separate way. It marks a break in their relationship. Presumably at that point, if you would talk to Barnabas, you talk to Paul, they would have said, okay, Paul's a good guy, but I can't stand him right now. You're just stubborn. Yeah, and maybe Paul would have said the same thing. Barnabas, he's too trusting, he's too soft, we're not going to get things done doing it his way. So the relationship is broken for a while because people wanted to control others. Barnabas wanted to control what Paul did. Paul wanted to control what Barnabas did. And it's, what I'm going to talk about here, I used to do back in the old days when I'd have a sermon. I think we used to obviously pray about this, still do, I'm not suggesting we shouldn't, but we always thought that we should have 7 points for things. 7 points for this, and sometimes it would come to 7 points naturally, and sometimes we would have to sort of, make sure that there's 7, maybe stretch one or combine or whatever. Well, guess what? So I was preparing this, I came up with 7 points. Now, of course, when you're in the audience, you're thinking, 7 points? What time is it? How long is it? 7 points? Do we have to have 7 points? Okay, these are 7 short points, all right? So don't be afraid. They actually kind of, sometimes they just flow one into the other. And what I'm speaking about, what I'm focusing on is in relationship is boundaries. Boundaries. Now, a lot of you have heard about boundaries. I know Dave Havers talked about boundaries in the past. But I have come to see over the last several years how crucial, how critical, how important, how valuable boundaries can be in helping our relationships be better than they sometimes are. And before I start talking about my 7 points, I just want to make another point that it is part of our human nature to criticize. It is part of our human nature to criticize, to find fault, to mock sometimes, to ridicule. Some of us, without even realizing it, and I'm not asking for any kind of show of hands, but just maybe ask yourself, what is your default mode to, when you see or hear something that somebody did? Is it to criticize? To find some kind of fault with it? With social media, that seems to be the default mode of perhaps most people who comment on social media. Somebody does something, and I'm reading whatever it is they did. That sounds good to me. That's a good thing that they did. But inevitably, there'll be people who criticize. They'll find some kind of fault and flaw or defect. And as I said a minute ago, I think it is part of our nature to do that. Ask yourself, if we all kept a diary of what we talk about, how many things did I complain about today? Did I get up this morning and say, look at the weather? I can pick on Ron Avey since he's not here, but Ron Avey would say, well, it's too hot. What, 60 degrees? No, it needs to be colder. Or I could be someone who says, no, this is cold. We complain about things like the weather. Maybe this morning, some of you might have thought, maybe I want to go out somewhere for brunch. And then you find out, all the restaurants are closed. I can't go anywhere. Be critical about that. So anyway, that happens. The example that came to mind, because I was talking about this as being human nature, even kids do that. And I remembered Elisha. You remember Elisha, bald guy? And in 2 Kings, we read about how a bunch of kids start yelling at him. Go away, Baldy. Go away. And then a bear comes out and mauls a bunch of them. But do you remember how many get mauled? You remember how many it was? How many kids? 42. Now, that doesn't mean it was just 42. That was the number who was mauled. So it was a mob that was after him. It's a mob of people, a mob of kids. I mean, you have 42 kids and more coming after you. That's not something to take lightly. But there is that nature of people to criticize and find fault and so on. All right, so here are my 7 points, or the 7 steps, or whatever you want to call them. There's 7 to improving relationships and to maintaining boundaries. And those boundaries are going to be critical for good relationships. First of all, relating to what I just said, stop negative evaluations of others. Stop your negative evaluations of others. Matthew 5:22. Let's go there. Matthew 5:22. And by the way, this applies to relationships, obviously in your family, in the church, but maybe even in the larger community. Because if you say, well, I'm good with that with my family, I'm okay with that with the church, but then you get me out there in the large community or in the nation, no way. I'm going to be negative as I want to be. No, you got to stop. You got to stop. Okay, let's look here at Matthew 5. Of course, I'm hearing some people thinking, you Killingley, you're meddling now. You got to stop. All right. So Matthew 5, verse 22. What I tell you is this, because he talks about the commandment of murder. It means no, it's not just killing. It's even what's in your heart. Anyone who nurses anger against his brother must be brought to justice. Whoever calls his brother good for nothing deserves the sentence of the court, and whoever calls him fool deserves the fire of hell. And the word raka, I think, is used in some translations, and also I think one of these words is the source of our word moron. The idea of total lack of respect for another human being. And when you think about it, you say, well, Jesus died for every last human being. And so if you're saying, well, this person is so utterly worthless, then you are disrespecting the sacrifice of Christ, because you're saying, well, this person is unworthy of that sacrifice. So it's something to avoid. Now we don't go around, hopefully, calling people, nasty, totally derogatory names, but sometimes we do our old Southern trick, don't we? We do our bless his heart business. Bless your heart, whatever. But let's go to another scripture here in Jude, right before the book of Revelation, Jude 9. And I think a telling example here of the archangel Michael. And it tells us, Jude 9, not even the archangel Michael, when he was disputing with the devil for possession of Moses' body, presumed to condemn him in insulting words. So you think, well, this is an archangel, this a holy one. Surely he can say things, that are true and that are, that would be viewed as negative, but they're true, so he can say them. He says, no, he didn't do that. He said, may the Lord rebuke you. May the Lord rebuke you. And so if we want, other people, if they do negative things, obviously they are answerable to God for the negative things they do and say and so on. But it's not my job to go around expressing negative evaluations of others. So I think, first of all, we need to stop that. Number two, stop trying to change or control others. Stop trying to change or control others. And if we stop right there, that would give you a whole lot of relief in life. Going back to that dishwasher thing. I told you my wife does it differently. When I decided to say, look, she can do it any way she wants. She can put stuff however she wants. I'm cool. Doesn't matter. I don't have to, hey, that improved our relationship right there. I didn't have to keep telling her, or she me. You stop trying to change or control. Even people in your family. Now maybe, again, I'm meddling, but subject came up when I was preparing this of some husbands, and, well, I guess I've written it down, so I'll say it, whose wives wanted to get a certain haircut, certain style. And the husband would say, no way. No, you're not getting it cut that way. My reaction is, why are you trying to control her hairstyle? It's her hair. She has to wear it. That's the way she wants to look. And of course, if you stop right there, there's no conflict. Let's say, worst case, it turns out to be a disaster. Guess what? She learns from that, right? So I shouldn't have gotten my hair done that way. Turned out not to be what I thought it would be. But the relationship has not been divided. But if you say, the husband says, no way, you're not doing that. No wife of mine is going to ever have that kind of haircut. And she really wants it. What does that do to the relationship? And then getting into boundaries, well, as I said, whose hair is it? Her hair? Your hair? And we could go on in different examples, and I don't want to, just belabor that point. But when you try to control others, it produces frustration on both sides. It makes you frustrated because they don't want to do what you want them to do. And it makes them frustrated because you're telling me to do something I don't want to do. And the only way you get someone to do what you want when he or she doesn't want to do it is by coercion. You have to force them to do it. And that only breeds resentment and anger. We read, I think in one of the scripture readings a few weeks ago, Daniel 3. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar builds this big statue. And of course, there are people who are prompting him and encouraging him to do this because they want to get rid of Daniel and his friends. But Nebuchadnezzar is there saying, okay, you bow down to the statue. You are going to do what I want you to do. And Daniel and his friends are responding, no, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. We don't want to do it. Well, I'm going to throw you in the furnace if you don't do it. Well, then you could go ahead and do it. So the only way that he was going to compel them to do it, they didn't do it, was through force, through coercion, through threats. Let's go to an example in Acts. Acts 5. And actually there's a good lesson in this chapter from a man named Gamaliel. But in Acts 5, in verse 28, the disciples had been preaching, and the council says to the disciples, "We gave you explicit orders to stop teaching in that name, to stop teaching in the name of Jesus. What has happened? You've filled Jerusalem with your teaching. You're trying to hold us responsible for his death." And Peter replied, "We must obey God rather than men." And the council wanted to put them to death. They didn't, because Gamaliel intervened. And in verse 40, they're convinced, they're persuaded by his argument, but they still had them flogged. All right, well, we won't kill you, but we will flog you. And then they ordered them to give up speaking in the name of Jesus. So they're trying to control them. And Gamaliel basically is saying, look, leave them alone. Don't try to control them. Because if what they're saying is of God, well, you'd be fighting against God. But if it isn't, it won't go anywhere. It'll eventually fizzle out. Others have tried. It goes nowhere. Don't try to control them. Let them speak. Let them be free. And the minute you just let go, you don't try to control others, you don't try to change others, that's going to be, because again, this is your boundary. You can't control what others say or do, ultimately. You really can't, unless, again, you use force. But that's not going to promote any kind of good relationship. Okay, third point. Start evaluating yourself first. Start evaluating yourself first. And by that I mean look in the mirror. I said, first one was stop your negative evaluation of others. Stop trying to. Well, if you're going to do that, if you have all this energy about, all this negativity that needs to be changed, well, start with yourself. Look in the mirror and see what's there. So Matthew 7, of course, is the scripture we all think of in this context. So let's go to Matthew 7. Starting in verse 1, "Do not judge, you will not be judged. For as you judge others, so you will yourselves be judged, and whatever measure you deal out to others will be dealt to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye with never a thought for the plank in your own? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when all the time there is a plank in your own?" So look in the mirror. See what needs to be changed about you. And this suggests that it's big. The plank is big. And then the fourth point is kind of follows immediately from that. Okay, you've looked, you see what needs to be changed. Then that's where you start. You start changing it. Here's the flaw, here's the plank. I need to get rid of it. Well, then start getting rid of that plank. That's your boundary. That's in your area of control. And we read here in verse 5, "You hypocrite, first take the plank out. Take the plank out of your own eye. Then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's." And actually, maybe your brother will be inspired by seeing how you have changed to change himself. But if you're going to change anybody, change yourself. Change yourself. Because again, that's the boundary that you have here. Okay, fifth point. Told you these would be fast. Accept others as they are. Learn to accept others as they are. They may not be the way you want them to be. They may not like the things you wish they liked. They may not vote the way you wish they voted. Whatever it is, accept them as they are. And I added here MYOB. What does that stand for? Mind your own business, right? Yeah. Mind your own business. If you want to avoid a lot of conflict, that's really helpful. Because people don't change unless they decide to. People don't change unless they decide to change. And then they decide to stick with it. They don't change because you want them to change. Again, unless you're coercing them. You know, the example of coercion might be, hey, boss, you got to accept me as I am. I heard that in the sermon. And I can't wake up to get to work at 8. I'm sorry. That's just the way I am. Guess what? The boss says, well, I'll tell you what. You don't show up at 8, you don't get a paycheck. Now, there's a little coercion. Yeah, it is. So I will change because, I want that paycheck, right? But otherwise, if that wasn't there, if that was not an issue, I wouldn't change. So you have to learn to accept others as they are. That doesn't mean you think that as they are is good or bad or indifferent. It's just the way they are. 1 Corinthians 7, I think, speaks to that. So let's go there. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 27. Paul writes, are you bound in marriage? Do not seek a dissolution. Has your marriage been dissolved? Do not seek a wife. And how does that apply? Well, sometimes people are, they don't mind their own business. They say, hey, Joe, you need to get married. Jane, you need to get married. And, or I've heard situations where Joe and Jane are married. Hey, Joe and Jane, you need to have kids. Hey, Joe and Jane, you've got a boy. Now you need another kid. You need a girl. It's kind of like, why are you trying to change? Why are you trying to tell other people what to do? Mind your own business. They're single. They want to stay. Let them stay single. It's none of your business. Because those things, all of those things, when you cross these boundaries, you create conflict. And these conflicts break relationships. And we don't even realize that. We do that sometimes frequently. And we don't realize, actually this is harming those relationships. You let people be. In this same book of 1 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 8, Paul writes, food will not bring us into God's presence. If we don't eat, we're none the worse. If we do eat, we're none the better. So if you eat meat, you don't eat meat, meat offered, it doesn't matter. Don't try to force people to do what you think they should do. Oh, you should be a vegetarian, or you shouldn't be a vegetarian, or you should be this, or you should be that. Let them be. Let them be. Leave them alone. Okay, 6th point. Now this gets to, what if the other person's behavior is bad, is unacceptable? It's something, maybe it's immoral. You said let him, you can't change him, but it's bad. I'm not saying that you can't, as a friend or as a brother, say to someone, friend, brother, I really think that behavior is hurtful to you. Absolutely. Tell them that. Say that. But after you've told them, it's up to them. If they choose to change, they will change. What happens if they choose not to change? Doesn't matter how many times you keep telling them, they're not going to change. So in that case, we get to point 6. If others' behavior is unacceptable to you, put some distance between you and them. Distance yourself. Separate yourself. Don't spend time with them. Still in this book of 1 Corinthians, let's go to chapter 5. 1 Corinthians 5. And start looking at verse 9. Well, from verse 9. And Paul writes, in my letter I wrote that you must have nothing to do with those who are sexually immoral. I was not, of course, referring to people in general who are immoral or extortioners or swindlers or idolaters. To avoid them, you would have to withdraw from society altogether. But I meant that you must have nothing to do with any so-called Christian who leads an immoral life or is extortionate, idolatrous, a slanderer, a drunkard, or a swindler. With anyone like that, you should not even eat. So yeah, if a brother, is overtaken in a fault, we read that too in Galatia, you tell him. And if it's a serious enough fault and they don't want to change it, then you say, okay, we're just not going to be able to spend time together. All right? That's your boundary. That's your relationship. I'm not going to try to change you. I'm not going to try to tell you what to do. But I don't have to, have a relationship with you, because it's harmful, it's noxious, it's toxic. So absolutely, you can distance yourself from other people. You are not obligated to spend time with anybody. Sometimes people do that. It's usually with family. So, well, I have to go to this event with a family, and it's really toxic. No, you don't. There's a 2-letter word in English called no. Somebody asks you to go and you don't want to because you say no, sorry. Not that I'm sorry, but I'm not going. Right? You can do that. That's your choice. And so that's the final point. Keep those boundaries in place. Keep those boundaries in place. Be consistent. Don't back down. Don't allow people to control you, tell you what to do. Say, hey, that's my choice. That's my decision. Matthew 5, going back to Matthew, this is a slightly different context. It's talking about swearing, taking oaths, I should say. But in Matthew 5 and verse 37, Jesus says, let your yes be yes, your no be no. Be consistent. Don't back down. And if we do that, we make a genuine effort to keep those boundaries in place and follow those points. As I said, you stop criticizing others, finding fault. You stop trying to change or control others. You look in the mirror, see what needs to be changed in you, and then you start changing that. Then you learn to accept others as they are. And if others are behaving in ways that are totally unacceptable, then you separate. You don't spend time with them. And then you are consistent. You do this consistently. And then you'll see that relationships can be healthier. And people will appreciate that. So you can have healthy and flourishing relationships with your spouse, your children, other family members, with friends, with colleagues, people you work with, people at church, etc. And as I said at the beginning, that's what we were made for. We were made to have a right relationship, first of all, with God. Adam and Eve messed that up. But we have that opportunity. We have a right relationship with God, and, of course, to have that healthy, positive relationship with our family, with our friends, with our neighbors. Boundaries protect us, and they protect others. They keep our relationships safe. As Robert Frost put it, now he used the word fences instead of boundaries, but you all remember what he said, what he wrote. Good fences make good neighbors.